Humans of the cardboard, welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today we've got a really fun discussion. We are looking at I've picked out 6 different archetypes, old classic juggernauts in the competitive scene that I think are probably ready for support. Now, this is probably no surprise, but it is one of those things where, like, you think back and you're like, wow, these decks really were tier 1 at certain points, or just really, really high competitively. And look at them now. They've fallen off so much. They haven't got much love from Konami in years and years, and they definitely deserve it. So specifically looking at those old competitive decks, because you never really think about that, and I know people get in that mindset of they had their time, we don't need to make them good again. We don't need to make them tier 1 again. I'm not saying that necessarily, but I do think some of these archetypes are like beloved by a lot of people. If Konami wants to make money, they'll give some support. They don't have to be tier 1, but a playable rogue deck, you know, maybe tier 2. That's the max that I'm looking for here. And if they get crazy with it, maybe tier 1 again. But we saw what happened with Spiral, so yeah. Anyway, getting into the thing, we started with our first archetype here, and that's frogs. Paleozoic frogs. Like, this deck is still a pretty potent engine, but the problem has always been that you don't have enough frog cards, and you have to play 3 swap frog, which are engine cards. Dupe is more of an engine requirement, not an actual like engine pusher, and Ronin's just a straight up brick. So like there's a huge problem there. So do you lean on the swap frog side, or do you lean on the Paleozoic side if you're going to give new support? So do you lean into the trap stuff, or do you maybe make another frog or 2 that are actually playable? I don't think they should ever really take Substitute off the ban list. But what if they were to just make another frog or 2 that are like decent and make it a little easier to get into Toad plays? Because the problem is the deck just like can't even end on 1 Toad consistently, let alone 2. And I know I understand why Konami might want to be a little bit more reserved about ending on 2 Toads. And the main difference with frogs and like sharks, I know people are like, sharks can make 2 Toads, what's the problem? When sharks make Toad, it can't use the effect to summon from deck like how in frogs they can. So you're not only getting 2 Omni Negates that also steal the opponent's card, which is insane. So you don't even get anything in grave. You get to summon 2 potential dupes or swaps to like just to push your engine even further for next turn and almost like secure OTKs. As well as being a +1 when they leave the field. It is so insane, all the value that Totally Awesome gets you. So I understand why fully functional Totally Awesomes, 2 of them is kind of scary, but I don't know, it's better than something. You know what I mean? It's better than what's going on now, which is just like not enough. Like, frogs have just been almost entirely power crept in terms of just trap deck usage, right? We're getting new, better trap decks. So people are rather playing Eldritch, Altergeist, even Dinomorphia. I think people will think is better than frogs right now, and I think it'd be cool to see like new frog stuff to give them a chance. So I definitely think frogs fall into this category, and like I said, they could go down that Paleozoic category if they want. Maybe give them a card that helps them search a Paleozoic easier. I mean, I guess technically they have it, but I mean like something that's easier to summon than that, because you always want to go Toad first, but maybe there's something else that can like also get you there. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. All right, next up here is Tellarknights. Most of you know how I feel about Tellarknights. I think Tellarknights is the single best deck that if I am Konami and I'm in their marketing room, whatever, I'm like, Tellarknight support. If our next set feels underwhelming with the stuff we already want to put in it, Tellarknight support. This is like, to me, might be the #1 older archetype that hasn't gotten support in a long time that like would help sell a set, especially if it makes them even rogue, right? Like I think a lot of people would actually acknowledge. I've talked to some people and they're like, Tellarknights can grind. Even in 2022, Tellarknights can grind. You get past turn 1, turn 2, and you're playing against a deck that doesn't grind particularly well, this deck can win, which is really great. But the problem is they're so slow. They just need to speed up a little bit. Not even insanely, but like maybe make a Trevere turn 1. And that's it. So that you can set 3 back row with the Trevere, and you've ripped a card out of your opponent's hand. He floats. You're good to go, right? I think even that is like all they really need. and it's not going to take much. It's just the fact that all the monsters, when summoned, and you're trying to summon pretty much all of them and use them again every turn, is just, it helps you push your engine like so much. It's crazy. And Travere's still insane. The other problem is like the spells and traps are not searchable, so you have like Stellar Nova Alpha, but that card is like arguably worse than the new die card. It's the trap that like tributes a warrior, pops a card, then draws you a card. It's like the same thing as Stellar Nova Alpha. Instead of negating something, you're popping something, but you don't have to wait for your opponent to activate anything. And it's even more searchable because of stuff like Trap Trick, and it's a trap deck anyway, so you might even want to play Trap Trick already. So like you could argue the die card, the new die trap, is better than Stellar Nova Alpha if they don't make Stellar Nova Alpha searchable. So that would be another huge thing, would be a little bit of speed, but also the ability to search the Teller Knight or the Teller spells and traps. That way you can maybe get Alpha, maybe get Skybridge. If Skybridge is searchable, it becomes so much better in the deck. And maybe you'd be even able to play one copy of Genesis as well, getting you the ability to pop like 2 or 3 back rows at times, and it's quick effect. So that's a pretty useful utility card that could become searchable. But yeah, I think they definitely should come back, even if it's nothing crazy, just a little bit of speed, a little bit of searchability for the spells and traps, and we are in there like swimwear, let me tell you. Taking us to our third archetype of the day, Cosmos. Now, the one thing I was always reserved on with Cosmos is, even in closer to modern, I mean, it's been a couple of years, but when I would play Cosmos, you could lose duels depending on the deck you were playing. If you were playing Sky Striker and they summon a Dark Destroyer, maybe 2 of them, or 2 of their just big boys that can't be targeted, Sky Strikers really struggle with non-targeting just removal. And so they just felt really matchup based. I think we're in the point in Yu-Gi-Oh! Where it's like, it is what it is. There are going to be matchups. But Cosmos definitely need a lot of help. I mean, the fact that I think their mechanic inherently is like designed to be kind of inconsistent, right? You have to play a lot of big ships. They don't get themselves out of the hand. You need to see the small guys. You need to see the pilots to get the ships out. And it's just really clunky. So maybe if they got a couple of cards to really help unclunk that situation, couple of spells that make that a little more cleaner. You know what I mean? Maybe an extra deck monster. They don't have any extra deck monsters, right? I don't know. They've got Italia 3, right? They've got some cool tools. And I've seen some interesting builds combining it with other like archetypes, like Dragon Link stuff, like Rocket stuff. But I definitely want to see like a little more out of Cosmos, and like maybe the ability to play a true pure variant with some new support that unclunks it. Because that's the biggest thing, is just consistency. The deck loses to itself more than it loses to other decks in modern day Yu-Gi-Oh! Standards. So that would be really cool, but they definitely have some pieces. All of these decks have some pieces that are worth noting. So that's the one thing that's like bright for all of them. But yeah, I mean, the ships are legit, man. If we get like really consistent, quick effect ways to get out like Dark Destroyers and pop cards, and then he's big and untargetable and floats, like, yeah, like really strong. So we'll see. Which takes us to number 4, I believe, on this list, which is Girgia. This is another deck I've been mentioning for a while. It's definitely one you got to keep an eye out for. I think this is another deck that just has that essence. We haven't gotten a single support card for this deck in, I don't know when this deck came out, probably what, 2013, 2014, something like that. We have not seen a support card, period, for this archetype in forever. And the deck has some cool pieces. You've got stuff like Girgia Accelerator, jumps out of the hand really easily, as well as a Searcher. They've got like a Lone Fire Blossom type card. And they have something like Girgia Next, which searches any level 4 lore machine in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! So that opens the door for a little bit of generic synergy, right? Which is really cool. But we'll just have to see, you know. This guy even floats as well. This card's really good, right? The one problem though is Girgia, the deck existed during a time where like decks weren't setting up their own interruption a ton, right? This deck was back in the day more of a resource engine. You keep making Girgia Next, you keep searching a follow-up, and you just keep grinding, keep putting a beater on the field, and then you draw into traps, right? And you'd use those traps when you saw them. But this deck never really searched you traps. It never set you up like active interruptions. So that's one thing I would want to see them do with this, is give them any way to actually get an interruption out, because we've already got all the Earth Machine stuff. So if this deck really was able to hold its own as an engine, that just got you solid value, maybe this could be an engine that kind of jumps in on the whole Earth Machine train and gives you another, you know, strong addition to the Machina, Infinitrack, Therian. I don't know. What's the other one? Am I forgetting something? I feel like I'm forgetting a big one. Trains, of course. Pool and like make something special. That would be really, really cool. But yeah, Geargias definitely fit that mold to me as well. Next up is spellbooks. You guys know how I feel about spellbooks. They're just a cool engine. The one thing I will say is they need to be careful, kind of like how the Geargias could be used in Earth Machine. There is actually a surprisingly really good pool of spellcaster stuff, whether you're looking at Dogmatica. Probably the best synergy with this card, this deck specifically, the Magista stuff. I know not all the Magista stuff is crazy, but specifically the Link one helps you abuse so many things. It actually is really good. Magician's Souls being a thing, and that you're probably already inherently playing a deck with high-level spellcasters, so Magician's Souls, you don't even have to play bricks with it, and that card's just absolutely bonkers. And there's more stuff. I can't think of it off the top of my head. I know there's more stuff, though. I'm just brain farting here. But spellbooks are one of those engines, right? Like, it's just such a great resource engine. You've got knowledge to draw you 2 cards super easily. You've got stuff like Fate, which is actually like a really strong interruption. That's what I have here. I don't think we need knowledge off the ban list. I don't think we need knowledge to ever come off the ban list. But if they wanted to give us, I think monsters, I think that's what they need to do. And I get it. This is like a spell archetype. So maybe give us 1 or 2 new spells, spell books that are like interesting and cool. But outside of that, like I genuinely think like we just need better monsters, like 1 or 2, maybe like an actual boss monster, like whatever it's called, World of Prophecy. That card doesn't do anything, right? Like we need like, give us an interruptive boss monster that's fairly easy to summon, you know what I mean? Banish 1 or 2 spell books from grave to summon it or something, and like that would be really, really cool. But until we get something like that, like, you know, well, the deck is just this engine doesn't do a ton unless it's paired with that stuff, and even then, like it still feels underwhelming in terms of power. It's a good resource engine, just not very strong. So I definitely think spellbooks are due for some support. Even if it's a little bit of support, I'd want to see some new monsters that are actually playable aside from Blue Boy, and then I think that's the biggest thing. Which takes us to our final archetype. What? Oh shoot! Did I shoot, I forgot to throw it in here. All right, the pictures aren't here, but we'll talk about it. Is Ritual Beast. Ritual Beast is another deck that, like, in its heyday was like the best deck in the game. It kind of was one of the first combo wombo decks, even though you weren't really making like a huge negate board. You were setting up like 1 or 2 traps, and that was still strong enough, especially with the grind game the deck had. In modern day Yu-Gi-Oh, the deck can't beat a hand trap. That's really what it comes down to, is they can't do much going first, because 1 hand trap a lot of the time will stop them, and specifically going second, I mean, it's just impossible for them to beat. So I understand their mechanic that all of them can only be special summoned once, so that definitely hurts their ability to play through interruption sometimes, like having those restrictions, but they also just don't have the best cards in general that like help them play through that stuff. So I guess I'd like to see that stuff. I've always loved the designs of all those cards, and I know the combos are like crazy, but like it certainly wouldn't hurt to give Ritual Beast a little something that helps them beat interruption a little bit nicer. I guess E-Telly technically helps. They do have a couple of low-level spell or psychics, I mean. But still, they can only be special summoned once. You summon it once, and that's it. That's your extension with that card, and that card cannot come back, which is what the deck wants to do, is like keep summoning into more and more names, but you're kind of eliminating names from your pool every time you use an E-Telly, so you have to be careful with that stuff. But I do think it's one of those decks that like can kind of fit into this category. It's probably the lesser of the 6 that I'm going over here today, but I still think it's one worth noting. So that is pretty much it for today, guys. Let me know your thoughts down below. Are there any other archetypes that you think fit this exact mold, right? Like older, classic kind of competitive deck that existed years and years ago. It's very much been power crept, and it's probably due for like a really solid wave of support. Hasn't gotten anything in a while, and you think it would be a big hit. Specifically, I think like Frogs, Teller Knights, and Spellbooks would be like huge. Even Cosmos, a lot of Cosmo fans. Right. Like a Girgia, I don't know how many Girgia fans there are. I know there's a lot of Earth Machine fans, so I'm sure they do fine. But I know these other 4 archetypes, like specifically, like people like will go for them. So I think it would help Konami sell products. And I think a lot of players would be super happy. So I think this just makes a ton of sense. Let me know your thoughts down below about these archetypes and if you think they deserve support, or if you think there's a couple of other archetypes that you think also fit this mold that deserve support. Let me know your thoughts down below, and I will definitely be down there having conversations. So thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Subscribe if you have not yet and you want to see more stuff from your boy down the line. Peace.